Today's ramble is to do with Parliament. I've been watching with horror the shouting, screaming, the childish schoolboy errors that they were making, the playground antics of both parties, well, all the parties, not just Labour and Conservatives, all of them. And the SNP didn't like what the Speaker said, so they walked out. Some of the Tories decided to jump on the bandwagon and walked out with them. So what is going on? The Conservatives have been in power for 13, 14 years now. And my feeling is they've run out of ideas. They've been in too long. And this applies not only to Conservatives, but it applies to Labour when they were in power. The same thing happened to them, right the way back as far as Harold Wilson, Margaret Thatcher, and we've got it again now. They're not listening to the people. They're listening to a small minority of people, usually those people who are on some sort of X or Facebook or TikTok or something, and they seem to believe that that is what the country wants. Well, there's a lot of us out there who are not on TikTok, Facebook, and I'm one of them. The nearest I come is WhatsApp. The Labour Party, well, they haven't got rid of anti-Semitism, that's obvious. They've had to ban two of their councillors, MPs now for what they did, and they've been kicked off. One's actually been kicked out of even standing. I think Keir Starmer's doing his best, but he's fighting against a very powerful anti-Semitic crowd inside the Labour Party. This goes back to the days of Jeremy and all the other stuff that was going on then. Fortunately, they haven't really come up with any policies. Every time they're interviewed and they're asked, what would you do different? The stock reply, to me anyway, and these are only my personal observations, appears to be, we wouldn't do it like this government's doing it. Well, that's not an answer. I'm sorry, to any Labour MPs out there, this is not an answer. I want to know, I'm sure there are other people out there as well who want to know, what are you going to do? Not, I'm not going to do it like the Conservatives did, but what are you going to actually do when you get into power? I mean, I've been around long enough to have lived through two previous Labour governments, both of which bankrupted the country. And I've been around through three nearly Conservative governments, who again have just lost the plot after about 10 years. It seems to me that none of the parties actually bother to learn from their experiences or try to adapt their behaviour for the good of the country. Now, maybe I'm being unfair. There may be MPs out there that do want to do things for the good of the country, but I can't see it. Nobody can. And this is the problem. They appear to be doing whatever they can for their own benefit or for their own political ideation that they happen to be going with at this time, or jumping on particular bandwagons, whatever seems popular on Facebook, Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called now, etc. Instead of looking at it and saying, well, actually, what can we do for the benefit of the people? Obviously, you can't please all the people all the time, and I wouldn't expect them to. But it'd be nice if they came up with ideas which actually benefited the majority of people. This is the problem. They're not talking to each other. Tories won't talk to Labour. Labour won't talk to Tories. Tories go on about the Labour flip-flopping and left-wing ideology, etc., etc. You've got Labour going on about, the Tories are mill owners throwing old ladies out in the street. They appear to be living in the 17th century, as far as I can see. Anybody is Tory bad, anybody Labour good, and they got the same thing coming from the other direction. And it's childish and it's depressing for anybody who happens to be just sitting on the outside looking in. Some parties have good ideas, even the Greens, even though they want to take us back to the days of horse and cart, which obviously isn't practical or even workable. But they have good ideas, but they're dismissed because they're the Greens. Tories come up with some good ideas, but they're dismissed because they're the Tories. Labour come up with good ideas, and they're dismissed because they're Labour, and it's just another left-wing agenda. Why can't they all get together and actually look at what is good for the country and how to achieve it? They all have different ways of achieving things, that's fine. But surely they need to get round a table together and say, right, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. I know it's a fantastic idea and probably totally unworkable, because there are certain Labour politicians who refuse point blank to speak to anybody who happens to be in the Conservative Party, and there are some Conservatives who won't talk point blank to anybody in the Labour Party. But these people need to have their heads banged together and told to get on with it. That's what they're voted in for, to do the best for the country, not for themselves, not for London, not for Birmingham, not for any particular part of the country, but the country as a whole. And they seem to have lost this vital little bit of information. You've got the Liberals as well in there. Now, I know they haven't got many MPs. I mean, they've got one, two, something like that. But they just, they do occasionally come out with good ideas. Unfortunately, they blotted their copybook big time in the last election when they were going to overturn Brexit against the will of the majority. Now, they can go on about, oh, it's bad for the country, etc., etc., and that's a totally different debate, which I don't propose to have here now. It's far too complicated, it goes on far too long. But the upshot was the country as a whole, the United Kingdom as a whole, voted to come out of the EU. We didn't leave Europe, despite what people say. We left the EU as a body. And apparently, as far as the Liberals were concerned, the fact that we voted to leave should have been totally ignored, and we're going to be taken back in. If they got into power, they'd take us back in no matter what. And to me, that is not democracy. Democracy means you vote for something. If you lose, you lose. That's it. That's what democracy means. You don't always like the result, but everybody's had a say about how that result's going to go. And that's the way it should be. I don't always like the votes that come in, and it goes against things I believe, but I'm a Democrat and I will go with what the majority say, because that is what it's all about. I mean, the very word idiot comes from the Greek idiotos, which means he who doesn't vote in the forum. So that really tells you an awful lot about some of the things that are going on out there. I know there are hardcore Labour who never vote Conservative and hardcore Conservatives will never vote Labour. That's fine. But I voted personally for all the parties at one time or another. Who am I going to vote for this time? I don't know. As far as I can see, none of them are worth my vote. I mean, obviously, SNP and Clyde Cymru don't come into the equation as far as I'm concerned, because I live in the middle of England. Reform Party. I haven't heard much about them. There's a few sensationalist adverts about them and headlines, but I really don't know. I haven't heard any policies from them. I don't know what they're trying to do. I had a leaflet through the door the other day about reclaiming the country, etc., etc. No policies. It didn't actually tell me anything. It was just jargon, and I threw it in the recycling immediately. I don't know what they're trying to do. They need to put some policies on the table. Same thing that can be said for other parties as well, of course. Nobody seems to have any real idea of what the hell they're going to do when they get into power. International forces do come into play, that is obvious. But what are you going to do for the common people of England and Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Wales and Scotland. What are you going to do? It's an open question to any politician who hears this and wants to reply. What are you going to do? And I don't want to hear not like the Tories did it, or well, we're going to do that and come up with some wild and fanciful thing. I want actual things that you can quantify. So in a couple of years' time, we can say to you, you said you were going to do this. It hasn't happened. Why? Why hasn't it happened? Now, so as I say, I've voted for all parties in my lifetime. I've voted Conservative, I've voted Labour, I've voted Liberal once. But to be honest with you, if Screaming Lord Such hears this, put some candidates out, mate. I think you've got a chance this year. There's nobody else out there worth voting for. At least the Raving Loony Party are honest about it. And they come out with ridiculous ideas, but at least they're honest about it. I mean, who else can we vote for? Who else is there? There is nobody out there credible, in my opinion, to vote for. And I find that a very sad state of affairs. Now, I do know, you can go back as far as the 17th century when you had the small parliament, the rump parliament, the short parliament, the long parliament, etc. But the current rules in the House of Commons were supposed to produce stable government. But when the Speaker of the House gets shouted down and they ask for his resignation, they go storming out, they start applauding and shouting. That to me shows as a fundamental breakdown in the discipline of the House. And that needs to be looked at as well. Starting to go off on a tangent now, so I'm going to shut up at this point. If you've got any remarks, please leave them below. Quite happy to try and answer any questions you've got from my own perspective. As I said, this is not me analysing the House of Commons. This is me simply giving my frustration on the off chance that somebody in the corridors of power sees this or hears about this. And I'm sure I'm not the only person out there that is feeling the same way. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe and comment if you wish. Any ideas you've got of things you'd like me to talk about, please leave them below. And a very good day to you all.